Two algebraic expressions are equivalent expressions if they have the same value for all values of the variables. The following properties show expressions that are equivalent for all real numbers. Take note, some properties of real numbers. We'll let A, B, and C be any real numbers. First, the commutative properties of addition and multiplication. Changing the order of the addends does not change the sum. Changing the order of the factors does not change the product. The commutative property of addition, as A plus B equals B plus A. An example of this, 18 plus 54 equals 54 plus 18. And the commutative property of multiplication, in algebra, A times B equals B times A. And an example, 12 times 1/2 equals 1/2 times 12. Next, the associative properties of addition and multiplication. Changing the grouping of the addends does not change the sum. Changing the grouping of the factors does not change the product. The associative property of addition, shown with algebra, A plus B, in parentheses or grouped, then plus C, is equivalent to A plus the group B plus C. An example, the quantity or the sum 23 plus 9 plus 4 equals 23 plus the sum of 9 plus 4. And the associative property of multiplication. A times B times C equals A times B times C. An example, 7 times 9 times 10 equals 7 times 9 times 10. Some more properties of real numbers. We'll let A be any real number. The identity properties of addition and multiplication. The sum of any real number and 0 is the original number. The product of any real number and 1 is the original number. The identity property of addition. In algebra, A plus 0 equals A. An example, 5 3/4 plus 0 equals 5 3/4. The identity property of multiplication. With algebra, A times 1 equals A. An example, 67 times 1 equals 67. The zero property of multiplication says the product of A and 0 is 0. In algebra, A times 0 equals 0. And an example, 18 times 0 equals 0. Finally, the multiplication property of -1 states the product of -1 and A is -A. In algebra, that can be stated as -1 times A equals -A, and an example, -1 times 9 equals -9. That leads us to problem 1, identifying properties. What property is illustrated by each statement? Statement A, 42 times 0 equals 0. Well, consider this in the properties we just reviewed. We have multiplication, we're multiplying by 0, and our product is 0. That's an example of the zero property of multiplication. Statement B, the sum of y and 2.5 plus 28 equals y plus the sum of 2.5 and 28. So notice the grouping symbols have moved. That's an example of the associative property of addition. Statement C, 10x plus 0 equals 10x. So what we have is a term, 10x, and we're adding 0 to it, and we just get that same term back, 10x. That's an example of the identity property of addition. Your turn, part A. What property is illustrated by the statement 4x times 1 equals 4x? Part B. What property is illustrated by the statement x plus the square root of y plus z equals x plus z plus the square root of y? Take note of what's changed from left to right and let that help you identify the property.